Does R. Kelly say gay rights? No. So I just watched Trapped in the Closet for the first time. It's bad, but I enjoyed it. A good thing to turn my brain off to. There's a lot of characters in it. A whole ensemble. But I'm mainly here to talk about Chuck. Oh, Chuck. Now, if you haven't seen Trapped in the Closet, Chuck is a character who... Well, I should probably start from the top. In fact, before I go on, I should really probably talk a little bit about R. Kelly. All around bad guy. By all accounts, did real heinous stuff to a lot of people. We'll come back to this. In the meantime, though, let's talk plot. Trapped in the Closet follows a drug dealer named Sylvester, played by Kelly, who gets caught up in an ongoing chain of infidelities involving him, his wife, and a bunch of other boring characters. Beyond that, nothing really happens. We meet a bunch of other people, premises are established, threads are left open, nothing happens. One of the nothings that happens involves a mistress, her husband, and her husband's gay lover. Let's get specific. Chapter 1. The year is 2005. Sylvester, having cheated on his wife the previous night, comes to in the mistress's bed, and realizing he stayed longer than he intended, starts rushing to leave. The mistress admonishes against this, saying her husband's about to get home. And with no obvious point of egress, Vester hides in the closet. This doesn't work. Chapter 2. So the hubby gets real angry. After revealing he's a pastor, he makes a call to somebody telling him to come through. Who could they be? After the three waffle for a bit, the mystery person arrives and ta-da! There's our guy. Chapter 3. Chuck is finally introduced by name. Speaking of names, we learn that our married couple is Kathy and Rufus. The participants in our love triangle start flipping out at each other. Sylvester, fed up with the situation, calls his home phone, and a strange male voice responds. Infidelity alert! Chapter 12? Okay, so the chapters are in numerical order, but I'm skipping ahead here because we don't actually see or hear from these three again until this point. The chronology and pacing of the whole thing is... So we pick back up in Kathy's house just after Sylvester had rushed out to investigate his mysterious call. We find out that Chuck is a deacon, whatever the fuck that means. Kathy and Chuck spend a while being antagonistic toward each other. Well, when I say that, it's mainly Kathy being shitty about the fact that Chuck is gay. Rufus makes an attempt to steer the conversation towards some sort of resolution, but Kathy, remembering she has an unrelated plot thread to tie up, decides to disengage from the situation so she can answer a phone call from her friend Gwen, who happens to be Sylvester's wife. It's a whole thing. Also, from here on in, I will be referring to this love triangle as Chuckussy. Anyway, in 2007, R. Kelly drops 10 more chapters of Trapped in the Closet. After 2 whole years, perhaps all our questions will be answered, the people thought. What will become of Chuckussy? Will our gay be buried? Yes. No, definitely yes. So let's run down more Chuckussy facts. Chapter 13. It's unclear exactly how much time has passed since the conclusion of Chapter 12. Like, it seems like it's not long after, but it's just like, okay, like I alluded to this before, but one super jarring thing about Trapped in the Closet is that the sense of chronology is just so vague. Like, we find out later that Chuck has all of a sudden been diagnosed with AIDS. But like, at what point did he contract HIV? Did he already have it in the first installment? How did he get it? There's no mention made of a drug habit or anything, and I don't think Chuck is sleeping with anyone else. R. Kelly definitely thinks that AIDS is just a magical force that materializes in gay people just because they're gay. Checks out to me. Anyway, we rejoin Sylvester at some point after chapter 12. He's driving along with his brother-in-law Twan, and we learn that he's on his way to collect some money from a woman. Also, he keeps harassing Twan about wearing his hat sideways, which, like, rude, Sylvester. The two eventually arrive at the rendezvous point, and Twan agrees to wait outside on lookout while Sylvester heads on in. Chapter 14. The woman in question enters a restaurant and joins Sylvester at a table before removing her disguise, and what? It's Kathy. We then find out through their exchange that Kathy, after having accidentally overheard Rufus having phone sex with somebody else, had decided to pay Sylvester to come back with her to her house to get caught by her husband, which, like, it doesn't really make sense, but we will talk about all that nonsense in a bit. We also learn that Kathy's original intention was to use this as a catalyst for breaking things off with Rufus. But as soon as her husband revealed that his infidelity was with another man, her homophobia kicked in. She literally says, "When I saw Chuck, I just couldn't lose Rufus to him." Yikes. Some other stuff also happens in this chapter, but it ain't got shit to do with Chuck-hussy, so moving on. Can you guess which chapter we're summarizing next? Chapter 15. Nah, I'm kidding. We're jumping to 18. Chapter 18. So we cut to Rufus overseeing worship at his church or steeple or cathedral or whatever the fuck. His phone rings. Assuming it to be Chuck, he secludes himself in his office. Chuck demands to know why Rufus has been so difficult to reach lately, asserting that the man has been choosing his wife over him. Rufus defends his choice, pointing out that Chuck had always known he was a married man, to which Chuck responds by reminding Rufus of the deep emotional investment he had expressed to him in the past. But so Kathy walks in at this point, overhears Chuck on the phone. They start arguing with each other again. Kathy calls Chuck a slur. Big surprise. Rufus sends Kathy out, which we love to see. He seems resigned to ending things with Chuck. After Chuck threatens to bring the story to the news, Rufus demands the two meet in person to talk things out. But Chuck says it can't happen, at which point he reveals his AIDS diagnosis. Okay, so here's where R. Kelly goes fucking hog wild. Chapter 20. So there's this elderly couple that lives next door to Sylvester, and the husband's played by R. Kelly. His name's Randolph, and like, I kind of love him, actually. Just an absolute goofball. But anyway, he does custodial work at Rufus's church and happens to be in his office when Rufus comes in for the Chuck call. So Mans hides under the desk. Of course, I'm joking. He hides in the closet. But so he overhears the whole convo from chapter 18. And he tells his wife, like, yo, so like, I just found out that the pastor's got a gay lover and like he's got AIDS. And his wife Rosie's like, oh, that's juicy. Let me spread this gossip right quick. Fair play to Rosie. I'd tell my friend about that shit if I heard it. Chapter 22. So then in the last chapter of this installment, you got this series of calls going where all the prominent characters in the chain of infidelity from earlier are like, hey, we should all probably get tested ASAP. But like, it's framed in this predictably shitty way where AIDS is this like looming antagonist. There's all these people getting calls from each other with this air of the pastor has what? Like, don't get me wrong. If I got a call and was told there was a possibility I might have a serious STD, I'd be shook too. But the whole thing is given this vague, spooky tone as though they're all talking about the Loch Ness Monster or some shit. It just feels bad to watch. Okay, so after 5 years, R. Kelly finally drops a third installment. And in this next set, we finally get something resembling resolution between Kathy and Rufus. Douglas, don't you mean Kathussy? Nah, my man Chuck gets done dirty. And to be honest, so does Rufus. Let's get into it. So as I said, this installment feels a lot more ussy than it does Chuck. Man literally does not show up once. Even the narrator keeps asking, where are you, Chuck? That's what I want to know. Other characters seem to love talking all sorts of fucking hot mess about the man. One would think the obvious explanation is Chuck having unfortunately passed away in the interim due to complications from his illness. But with the way R. Kelly writes, who's to fucking say? Either way, whether or not Chuck is actually dead isn't really an issue. Because this installment sure treats the man like he is. Chapter 26. and 27. So Kathy and Rufus go see this couples therapist. And it's basically just more of Kathy being like, I'm just so hurt by the fact that Rufus went and did a gay. And Rufus is like, I've gone against my religious principles and that's bad. And the therapist is like, that's right, you did do a bad by being gay. Religion. This therapist fucking sucks. Anyway, Rufus is adamant that he still loves Chuck. Kathy acts like her typical self-righteous self and storms out of the room in a huff. The therapist follows her out and is like, you gotta forgive him because the Lord teaches forgiveness or whatever. I'm a shill for God, yada yada. This therapist is acting more like a spiritual advisor than anything else, which also explains why he's fully on Kathy's side, which, again, not how a therapist works. But anyway, Kathy eventually caves and is like, hey, Rufus, I forgive you, even though you sinned and hurt me by sinning and are bisexual, which is bad, Rufus, bad boy, Rufus, but, like, I forgive you, though, but only under the goodness of my heart. Bad boy Rufus. And so we get R. Kelly's idea of a resolution. Thanks. I hate it. But what about Chuck? Where are you, Chuck? Well, therein lies the rub, right? Let's circle back to the first installment. So, infidelity is the narrative crux of the first 12 chapters of Trapped in the Closet. Someone finds out someone else has cheated. The cheater reveals an additional piece of information to make the drama even juicier. Lover is a man. Lover knows your lover. Lover is having my child. It just kind of rinse repeats like that for a while. But are some of these transgressions viewed more transgressionally than others? Oh yeah! Just look at Sylvester's situation. So, like, he cheats on his wife. At least, it's implied he does. Because obviously there's a whole weird thing where Kathy, like, agreed to pay him. Which, like, okay, let's talk about this now. Like, first of all, if her motivation is that she wants to leave her husband because she knows he's cheating on her, then, like, why you gotta do this whole scheme first? Like, if you want to cheat on him before you break up in order to get, like, petty revenge, sure. I don't condone it, but I can at least parse that thought process. But, like, instead you're paying a man to make it look like you slept with him, but also probably fully sleeping with him, actually. And also, she gave Sylvester a fake name, which, like, what are you trying to hide from him? And also, why not just, like, seduce a random guy to come home with you instead of this payment shit? Why are you making your life more complicated, girl? Either way, Sylvester cheats. He then finds out that his wife Gwen also cheated on him. And, like, when he finds out, he's initially furious. Like, making multiple literal threats on her life furious. And then as soon as she explains how she met her guy through Kathy, he does an immediate turn and is like, OMG, that's so funny. Ha ha ha, I ain't even mad anymore. I love you, wifey. Which, like, let's put a pin in Sylvester's violent homicidal mood swings until later. Either way, after this initial rift, literally everything is fine between the two of them. Like, a confrontation happens right after where Gwen's lover, a cop, comes back to the house and thinks Sylvester is like an intruder or something. A gun goes off. Twan accidentally gets shot. And this situation is undeniably calamitous, but unlike the initial confrontation between Chuckussy, the relationship of the married couple in question is no longer the crux of the issue. It took a single chapter for Sylvester and Gwen to just fully make up. They never bring the cheating up to each other again. Ever. Every time we see them after this, they're just like, fine. But why? Why are Rufus's infidelities treated with so much more weight than that of Sylvester or Gwen or even Kathy? Is it the gayness? Is it the... No, yeah, it's the fucking gayness. There are a few things that distinguish Rufus and Chuck's relationship from all the others. For one, Chuck is evidently not married. The greater majority of the infidelities in Trapped in the Closet occur with and between married people. This was also 2005, a full decade before the federal legalization of same-sex marriage. But this wouldn't have prevented Chuck from being at least, like, in a committed relationship with somebody else. Making Chuck single, save for his surreptitious relationship with Rufus, is a pointed choice on R. Kelly's part. Additionally, Rufus is really the only character we see who shows a clear long-term investment in his lover, emotionally speaking. Gwen splits shit off with her guy James after Sylvester catches her. There's clearly nothing lingering between Sylvester and Kathy. All of these relationships just immediately fade as though nothing happened, but Rufus is still pining after Chuck. While our other characters have quickly moved on from their casual infidelities, we see a Rufus which continues to be, in R. Kelly's eyes, corrupted by his bisexuality. Now, don't get me wrong, if my spouse were still, clearly emotionally invested in their lover and still talking to them in any meaningful way, I would be unhappy too. But it's also clear to me that Kathy would be hella shitty to Rufus even if he had broken shit off with Chuck immediately. It's like Kathy said to Sylvester. She literally stopped herself from ending her and Rufus's relationship the moment she found out that Rufus was cheating with another man. Every time she catches Rufus on the phone with Chuck, she instantly starts berating Chuck with slurs and other vitriolic language before she even knows what the two are discussing. The framing of the story agrees with her too. In the couple's therapy session, everything from the disapproving spiritual therapist to Kathy's inflated sense of control over the situation shows how the real problem is not Rufus's continued emotional investment in another person. Kathy isn't upset that Rufus cheated. She's upset that he is bi. And where does this leave our boy Chuck? In Chuck, we see a character who is slowly but surely stripped of their humanity, piece by piece, until they're literally missing from the scene entirely. From the start, Chuck is treated worse because of his gayness. When we first meet him, Kathy flings far more vitriol his way than she does her husband. Immediately through this malicious treatment, we see Chuck being framed in the antagonistic role, his presence posing a threat to Kathy and Rufus's stable, righteous, heterosexual relationship. In the second installment, his character has been further diminished, his full face never being shown, his words and actions only being viewed through Rufus's perspective, smothered and muted, drowned out by the pastor's blind loyalty to his wife and his religion. Simultaneous with this slow silencing process is the more overt transformation of Chuck into the antagonist. As the threat of AIDS looms over the rest of the characters, Chuck's faceless form becomes ethereal, with a once full man now viewed only through the lens of the debilitating disease that has begun destroying his body. In the eyes of our story, the gay man has consumed himself from the inside out for his transgression, until by the third installment, we can't see or hear him at all. So, obviously, this isn't unexpected. No one ought to be surprised that a story from 2005, written by R. fucking Kelly, no less, treats its gay characters absolutely horrendously. I worked on this video partially because I'm trying to get better at engaging with media critically, and after I watched Trapped, I wanted an excuse to sit with it a little bit more. The anti-gay tropes in Trapped in the Closet are, for the most part, incredibly overt, but at times these elements permeate through media in much more subtle ways. And that's why media literacy is fucking important, especially when it comes to talking authorial intent. Hoya! I'd be remiss to end this video without talking more about R. Kelly, the person. I'm not gonna detail all of the shitty things the guy has done, mainly because it's already been run down by a lot of sources. Also, demonetization is a thing. But You can see his blatant hatred for women and also likely anger management issues really coming through in Trapped. The way Sylvester casually makes threats on his wife's life. The way most of the cheating wives in the story are formed as the far more deceitful partner. It sucks. With this being said, I would still recommend Trapped in the Closet to anyone who hasn't seen it. Like I said, there's a lot wrong with it. Like, a lot. And if you're also like, well, I can't bring myself to consume any of R. Kelly's work anymore, I fucking get that too. But I will say that as many parts as there are that are like, well, from the 2000s, there are also some great musical moments, some amusing non sequiturs, and a whole ass chapter where R. Kelly voices a bunch of Italian American gangsters. It is so fucking dumb. In conclusion, R. Kelly bad, Trapped in the Closet also bad and very mean to the gays, but also listen to this man sing.
And then James says, no, baby, you don't have to say a word right now. When what? I'm in the hospital.
God damn it, R. Kelly.